Okay, class, the next section we're going to talk about is Western Christendom. This will cover pages 476 to 480 in your textbook. Remember that you have the textbook loaded on Edmodo so that you can go back and look at the textbook and read the pages themselves. I advise you to do so. What all was lost in the fall of Rome? With the overthrow of the last Roman emperor in the West by the German general Osidor in 476, Rome officially fell. However, this was merely a moment in a long-time decline of central authority and civilization in the West. Central political authority collapsed, cities shrunk and decayed, literacy was lost, roads fell apart, trade broke down, barter replaced standard currency, and diseases spread among a desperate people. What aspects of Rome survived? Well, while things fell apart in the Mediterranean, aspects of Rome survived in northwest Europe. Germanic peoples, once viewed as barbarians by Romans, adopted Christian law and military organization. The survival of the dream of Rome is best seen in the crowning of King Charlemagne from 768 to 814. He was the new Roman emperor by the Pope. He was crowned the new Roman emperor by the Pope in 800. As king of the Carolingian Empire, he sought to reestablish standard imperial infrastructure, bureaucracy, and the system of weights and measures. You see on the map, after Charlemagne, his empire was divided among his sons. The purple representing Charles the Bald, the green, the kingdom of Louis the German, and the yellow, the kingdom of Lothar. The red that's outlining was the whole empire of Charlemagne before he died. And they wanted to unify, but these attempts were unsuccessful. Later, Otto I of Saxony, who lasted from 936 to 973, would take the title of Holy Roman Emperor. So you see he created this large territory, which was just like Charlemagne, and he also received the title of emperor from the Pope, but he was vastly unsuccessful in his rule. Let's look at medieval periodization. And periodization pretty much means how things are kind of broken down on a timeline or time basis. First, we have what we call the early Middle Ages. This is basically after the fall of Rome up through the year 1000. Then they have what they call the High Middle Ages from 1000 to 1250, and then the Late Middle Ages from 1250 to 1500. You're going to need to be able to understand what happened in each one of these periods. So go back and make sure that you review these time periods, and this is one of the only times in which dates are kind of going to be real relevant in the things that you do. Okay, when Roman authority collapsed, an ad hoc political and military system developed as the political, economic, and social power of an isolated land, estates, or manors, which fell into the hands of wealthy warriors. As these warrior elites were in constant competition with each other, lesser knights and lords swore loyalty to stronger warriors. We're starting to see the rise of what we call feudalism. And as you see on the screen, the feudalism is a political, economic, and social system based on the loyalty and military service. So when you see old movies and things like that where it talks about knights and vassals and kings and different things like this is a time period in which we're talking about. Frequently, these people would receive land and loot for their military service. While the slavery in the Roman Empire faded away, peasants were increasingly not personal property, but they were tied to the land on which they worked and not free to leave. In return for the access to land, they had to pay some of their crops and other produce to the lord. In return, they also received protection. So keywords in this slide, you need to make sure you understand what lords are, what vassals are, what the exchange was, military support for protection. Also, what a fief is, one of your vocabulary words, fief being a plot of land. And these were the estates that came with the serfs to work on that land. Remember again, slavery had died out, but these people who were former slaves now become the peasants, and they start to serve on the land. They were not tied to the person, but they were tied to the land. This slide shows the social order under the system of feudalism. At the top, you have the church. The church pretty much controlled a lot of things. A lot of money went to the church. The church became rich during this time. And then you'd have the monarch or the king. The next level would be the nobles. Those people were the upper class, the elites. And then on the next level, you see we have the knights and the vassals. The vassals and the knights were pretty much the same, along the same lines. They were people who served the nobles. They would return military service for land in that type of trade. The next line being the merchants, the farmers, and the craftsmen. They were people who lived on the estates, on these fiefs, and they kind of they were free to come and go as they pleased, but they pretty much how can I say, they kind of were the lifeblood, the economic portion of this medieval time. And then on the last level, you have the peasants and the serfs, those people who were tied to the land, worked the land, and those types of things. This slide shows you a medieval knight and how the different parts of their armor, they didn't always have this on, mainly for the tournaments and things like that, and for show. Remember, the knights were kind of like the upper vassals, and they had a lot of prestige during this time period. This slide shows you a medieval castle, an artist's rendition of how a castle would have looked, showing you all of the different techniques, the architecture, different things like that. So make sure that you understand what a medieval castle would look like. This slide talks about the different parts of the castle, and as you see, make sure that you kind of understand how a castle was broken down, the different areas of the castle, the curtain wall, the lower bailey, the well in which people went to, main bailey, meaning this is where a lot of people congregated. A lot of them had water around it for protection to keep invaders out. Understand that castles were all throughout Europe, so there was a lot of warring that was going on between them. Just think about them as individual states, and they were able to, and one would attack another or take the other's land, so forth and so on. The life of the nobility. Now we know, like from seeing the social ladder, the nobility consisted of the lords, ladies, and knights, and a lord had almost total authority over his fief, which was given to him by a monarch or a king. And the ladies, still being patriarchal, had a few rights. And for entertainment, they had tournaments, which were the jousts that you see, which were the mock battles between the knights. Also, they had other types of entertainment, such as archery, huge dinners, minstrel shows, meaning that people would come and act out plays, different things like that, and they had singers. Well, how did a person become a knight? First of all, the boys would be taken from the home at the age of 7, and they would start as a page, and this was kind of an assistant to a knight. And then at 15, he would become what they call a squire, and he would go out on different things, make sure everything was taken care of as far as the knight was concerned. His equipment, everything was done. And then once he proved himself in battle, he would go to a ceremony and be knighted. Also, there was a code. You hear the word a lot of times called chivalry, and this is really just the basis for good manners in Western society. On the left, you see how a knight should be acting, and then that just kind of went through time, and as that word came about, you understand why it's good manners for men to do things for women. Now, understand, feudalism was the main portion of the this system in Western Europe, but the economic portion of this was called the manor system or manorial system. And you need to understand what manorialism was. It was the agricultural economic system of feudalism during this time period. How the people survived, what things they did to create this small city in which everything happened on the manor. We talked about the serfs, but what was their we need to understand what their role was, and what the role of the vassal and the lord and all of the people that were in this town or this manor. The serfs, like we said before, were tied to the land, and they were not slaves, but they were tied to the land. They couldn't come and go as they pleased, but they were not tied to the person or the master or the lord. This depiction shows how a manor was laid out, and as you see, these areas, as far as the planning was concerned, at the bottom of the picture, this is where the concept of crop rotation came out. A large pasture for where the animals graze, different things like that. You'd have the main manor house where most of the lords and everybody lived. Scattered out, you would see a lot of where the peasants and stuff lived. You'd have the trees in the orchard, you'd have a meadow, the blacksmith. But understand, in this territory, everybody was tied to that land. They didn't go too far away from from the manor. It was a self-sufficient territory, and everything was done on the manor. If you look at the chart that shows the way things were broken down, common fields in green, showing that this was for everybody, but there was a certain amount of land that was cultivated for the Lord. And understand, everything went back to him. He didn't do any of the farming. He did a lot of the things. He pretty much just ran the manor. The Roman Catholic Church and its hierarchical organization, priests, bishops, and cardinals, was the only surviving institution of the Roman past. Its organization allowed it to administer the faith in Latin and also amass via wealth and taxation. The church worked to convert pagan Europeans to Christianity in long and sometimes a slow process. Often pagan practices, sites, and holidays were remade as Christian rituals, churches, and sacred days. On occasion, force was used to spread the faith. With the church being the only pan-European institution and relatively weak, kings eager to build their power within their realms, secular sacred tensions flared over wealth and the right to appoint the bishops. So understand, there's different conflicts that took place. You have who should appoint the bishops and who should appoint the Pope himself. As we see today, it's a lot of the bishops will elect the Pope, and then the Pope appoints the bishops. In this time, you didn't understand who had all the power. Should the kings do it? The emperors? Should the church do it? So they came up with a compromise and saying that the church can select its own officials and the rulers retain an informal and symbolic role in the process. They pretty much could talk to the officials, the church officials, of who they want to select to do this, that, and the other, but they didn't have the main right to tell them that. So understand everything about the manor system. About feudalism, and understand the different parts. Feudalism was the political and social part, whereas manorialism or the manor system was the economic part. So make sure that you understand the differences between the two and be able to explain those. Go back to your textbook, look at all of the pages that are covered, pages 476 to 480, review those things and review your questions that come with them. You're also going to have questions that follow this video, so make sure that you answer those questions for your assignment. Have a good day.